to talk about things specifically related to the eNews, it's important to me that the interview not take longer than an hour and 10 minutes, because I have so much to do in preparation for the board meeting. I'm sorry to be late. I have been fighting a cold, and I was up until 3 last night getting documents out for the board meeting, and I slept in this morning. And meanwhile, the world goes forward. So
yeah, we need, on this recording, we need to stick to the interview, and the other stuff is for other discussion.
Yeah, and Darian, just a quick thought, and that sounds good all, and will do. I just want to share with you, Darian, I'm not sure if you have any more of the FSO, but if you go by that dispensary and get some, just like I did with my mom, if you took higher doses of the FSO, it would inhibit the virus from.
I think that we can skip the intro about WILPF. And can I ask you, Ellen, to go ahead to the first question?
Okay, Michael, as an editor, what do you like most about that work, and what do you like least?
Oh, are we not waiting for other folks? I'm sorry about that.
No, they're not able to make it.
Oh, got it. My
That's why
apologies.
we're recording this, so they can hear what you have to say.
Oh, okay, sure. What do I like most and what do I like least about being an editor? Okay. Well, as far as like most, I enjoy helping to best package our message, our mission, and the work of WILF, to present it to the greater world as best we can, to have it be done, obviously said well, while at the same time impactful. And I do work to balance the author's voice with that kind of universal WILF kind of general guidelines of how we'd like certain things, how we kind of present certain things, and so forth across articles. And yeah, what do I like least about it? Frankly, I don't really like. There's nothing about it that I'm like, I don't really like about this. I enjoy doing it. I guess what I would say, what I like least about it is that I'd love to have the good problem of having so many articles submitted monthly that we need to schedule them out and maybe merge them, where branches are doing things that are being submitted in issue committees, and every issue committee has one, and they're coming from all these different places, and we can really put work to kind of dovetail articles into one. That would be a good problem to have. I guess that's what I like least, is that we don't get more articles submitted in the couple months that I've served in this role.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We hope that you will edit for clarity and structure in articles. What other kinds of things do you look for in terms of editing?
Yeah, so clarity and structure are definitely super important. We were talking about that generalized structure that we want to have. So across each article, there's a general feel for the way an article looks and so forth, and formatting. So if we utilize things like bold or italics or underline or caps, or there's a certain kind of feel across. So that's the structure piece. And clarity always, what is being said here. Actually, this month I had to contact one of the authors for clarity, and the author said, "Oh, yeah, I can understand why." And we had to do a kind of a major edit to make it kind of clean up. And it was, whenever I would do something like that, I would make it a point to reach out to the, if it's not like a small little thing here or there, I mean, I would reach out to, like I did this month, and always do that type of work. Things that you say that I would look out for. Well, an opportunity I'd love to have with this particular role, and where I feel it can be a force multiplier in doing this, is incorporating topical, timely, and buzzworthy hashtags and references in the articles, or even hyperlinked information that is connected. Again, always, if that were to happen, being in communication with the author, just to, let everybody know that, if it's not already there, to see, oh, this is actually connecting with that, and they work in concert, or our World Beyond War organization that's already doing this, just opportunities for synergy and more comprehensive messaging that allows for, when it's posted on social media, that they resonate. So if we're going to say use a hashtag in a post on social media, the idea being that maybe we can have a practice of, with each article, putting in at the bottom of the article, some of those, to invite, when others, with the new website, hopefully soon, when they go to share on social media, that we'll invite and encourage them to share with that those hashtags, and potentially even for articles that are campaigns or calls to action, or even calls to invite people to come to become a part of WILPF, having potentially even some suggested posts for social media when we ask lower on the article for our members to be able to share. That might be something as well. But going back to the article itself, I would just say, accuracy, making sure that we're right on point with what's being shared. And I think that's an important thing, obviously. And again, not straying from the authors, and to being in integrity with the author, because I think that's, in any substantive change, I think it's important to check in with the author to do. I think that's a hallmark of what I would say I would imagine and want people to know me to do or be as the editor of WILPF, while also being able to synergize our work on social media. More comprehensive communication.
Okay. When an article has good potential content, yet is so lacking in writing quality or clarity or correct usage as to be uneditable, how would you work with such a writer?
Yeah. So what I would do there is if I can glean the general gist. I mean, if you're saying I can't even glean general gist, I'd have to go back and maybe gently ask for more clarification. Though that would probably be in a more highly extreme case, I would think, because what I would look to do in that particular instance is potentially maybe help kind of put some structure to it, that I can go back to I had to do this actually not this month, but last month. I did this with an announcement, and I restructured it, kind of helped make it more clear, and went back to the author and I said, hey, the way that was framed seemed a little confusing and not as clear and impactful. How's this? And if when I go back and it's not a thumbs up, how's this? Open to be able to be flexible. And the flexible piece, I think is really important, is understanding, not being so rigid, because like, for example, this month with the election, I kind of knew that we needed to give people space, because when the deadline came and we didn't really have, like, I knew this. I was right there on the deadline. I just sent out, hey, the deadline's going to be extended. And I was totally understanding of that. And then people were like, oh, I'm so sorry, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, no, it's fine. I understand. So I think that was, what I'd like to do is kind of move, like slowly start to move the deadline, like shift us so we can be more, I think what happened, I think we fell back. So it comes out in the middle of the month. And I know people might want to be more, I've heard that it would be nice to get it closer to the beginning, but whatever any folks feel comfortable with, I mean, I'm happy to do. If WILPF prefers the eNews to come out in the middle of the month, we can maintain that schedule. But if people would like to try to aim to have it come out, like even at the, like, the November eNews coming out, like,
Oh, Michael, I'm sorry, but we're far away from the topic of the question.
no, I know. That's just, yeah, I was tying that in just to, because it is something that it would come up. I'm sorry.
And this may relate to what you were saying. We'd like more of our members to write for our eNews. We realize that you don't know all our members, but still, how would you cultivate or encourage writers, given the means that we have available for this work, those tools and methods that we have include contacts with the committee chairs, with the branches, through the branches listserv, by reaching out to prior writers of branch news items, plus possibly emails, telephone calls, and texts. So how would you encourage more writers?
Yeah, so I think this is where there's an excellent symbiotic relationship between my role as a communications coordinator and the eNews editor, because in all the different roles, responsibilities, and facets to which I serve WILPF, formalizing this particular aspect of my involvement, and then people knowing me as that, I'm always listening, always seeing what can be a positive thing. When someone shares something, maybe that, and I say to them, hey, that can be an eNews. I'm the editor. I'd be happy to work with you to make that, a potential story. And I think, when interacting with the branches and learning of the branch work, I think that there's lots of opportunities to have additional pieces like the long form collaboration initiative that just happened with the Fun Schools First with you, Darian, and the Boston branch. I think that's a great opportunity to foster some new authors when working in collaboration for a piece like that. And then you have people in follow-up who want to continue and write monthly eNews stories and such. Love to, I know, for example, the Disarm Committee, has, I think, what is 11 or 12 campaigns that they're regularly talking about on their monthly calls. It'd be great if those working groups or campaign groups, whichever they call them, would like to have people emerge as authors and going on those monthly calls and inviting people to do that. And so that way Cheryl, isn't always having to author those. Maybe she can instead just give the sign-on co-author approval. That would be great. I'd love the opportunity to circle through in this role while I'm sourcing information from issue committees, attending issue committee working group calls, or monthly calls, or even branch calls. Like listening to the work they're doing, the issues that are important to them, and being able to not only be ears, but helping inspire and encourage them authoring articles I think it's a nice symbiotic a symbiotic relationship, myself in this role, because then they don't have to, the whole demystification of, well, how do I write an eNews and what's the process? And the whole, I'm right here. And yeah, you just submit it to me and we'll work together on making it happen, and let's do it. And yeah,
Excuse me,
yep,
so basically what you're saying is maybe attending issue committee calls and branch committee calls to, and asking them if they have any issues that they would like to, get into the eNews, and then offer to help anybody who wants, okay.
absolutely.
In your work, when you've been asked to edit something that conflicts with your own opinions or views, how have you handled that? And how will you handle that?
Well, fortunately, that hasn't happened.
No?
And no, not, I'm talking in the last 2 months of doing the eNews.
No, I mean, in general, in general.
How has editing something that conflicts with my own views? Yeah, so, well, I have to, talking about me as an editor, writing something that conflicts with my own views and how I deal with that. Yeah, so I'm imagining a situation where that would happen. Okay, so for example, let's say that we get a pro-Israel piece, for example, that pro-Zionist Israel piece, let's be clear. And I might go to the committee, the author, and the committee chairs and ask them if that is, oh, there's a great example. Here's an example. Middle East Committee actually is a good example. Some years ago, there was a statement that was about Israel detaining Palestinian children. And if, for example, that statement, at the exact time that was happening, it was during the Trump administration in 2018, and I was working with Occupy and Abolish ICE. Excuse me, it was 2019, summer of 20, I believe it was 2019. But it's 2018, 2019. Anyway,
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. And the idea was that the Trump administration, I shall be better, I'm sorry about that. The Trump administration was detaining our children at the border. And there was a similarity there, right? And the folks, how much solidarity we would have been able to gain, and supporters, the Middle East Committee even too, for their position and what it meant. Strategically, you're condemning Israel for detaining Palestinian children, and in the statement, you didn't incorporate anything about the US doing it at our border. So not only, see, that for a lot of people kind of makes WILPF look bad, because it makes WILPF, it's like American exceptionalism, right? And so, a lot of the things that make WILPF look bad are also things that I personally too would be opposed by, right? So what I would do with that, going to them, and I did at the time, was saying, hey, totally with you on this statement, but let's just put a little intro about like how we also condemn the United States doing this and anyone doing this, and upholding, the universality of, Declaration of Human Rights and what that says and what we should be doing and upholding. Let's not just say it for them, but not mention it for us? I know it's a Middle East committee, but there's a connection there, right? And I think the same thing happened too when we were publishing as an organization a statement in response to the death of George Floyd during the summer of 2020. And there was a statement that 50 or so women in WILPF had written and was getting ready to be finalized. And it was really a movement platform. It still exists online. And I had submitted at the very last week of when they were finalizing it. What I said was like, hey, maybe this statement helps you be more in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement and is more in tune with, being in solidarity with those suffering right now and the communities of those suffering. Because the movement platform you all drafted talks about the Paris Agreement and such. And it's like, that's not really what you want to be talking about with regards to the death of George Floyd and police brutality. You just want to stand with what they're saying, right? And be in solid and say their names like everyone's saying. And so that was a really positive thing that happened, because had the statement gone out the way it was, that would have been really, really bad for the organization. Kind of a tone deaf, like, oh, don't do that. And so that was another example of, so, I mean, I think that when you say, how would I handle it? I think the way I've handled it is I present the alternative. And in the case of George Floyd, I mean, over 50 WILPers agreed, and that became word for word the statement that you can go on the website now and see, and it's linked to the other movement platform sort of statement. And working symbiotically, that's great. That's fine. But had that been the formal statement, that would have been disastrous. With regard to that Middle East statement, unfortunately, that wasn't, and we lost an opportunity to be in solidarity with the Occupy and Abolish ICE folks, who actually kind of saw that WILPF statement, and it was, very disheartening on Occupy and Abolish ICE calls, which I were actually facilitating all the encampments around the country for the time. And this is where, like, if WILPF knew who I was and what I do, and like if we could all work collaboratively, we could have gotten younger folks who were involved in that to care about it. But that was a turnoff. And so there are those opportunities. We have them, we miss them. And sometimes people think like, oh, Michael's being but it's not. It's usually, if I'm saying that, there's good reason. I'm not doing it for personal reasons, my personal, I guess you could say my personal reason for why I would is because I want to see our work be as successful as possible, because I want to live in a better world. And, I want all children to be able to live in a better world. And that's what my real aim is. And that's why I'm here and doing what I do. Just to say in conclusion, WILPF is made up of a lot of, in the United States particularly, a lot of white women. So are teacher unions. And that's the largest voting bloc. And, that's, we could have influenced more white women. Trump wouldn't have got elected and this world would be a different place. So, there's a lot of work to do. And I'm all for, empowering the diplomatic leadership of the maternal as we really try to steward Mother Earth for like one world, one people, one planet over profit.
Darian, you're muted.
Thank you. I forgot. Have you encountered any difficult authors or bosses in the past? And how did that feel to you? How did you handle that?
Well, when I think about difficult bosses, I think about, working in the school system.
Right. So how did that feel and how did you handle it? We don't need the full background, but we're focused on what you felt and how you dealt with it.
Well, I mean, I think, the school example is a little different than WILPF example. I mean,
we're talking about in the past.
No, I understand. I was just saying this to a fellow WILPfer who once served as my supervisor. I was 33 years old when I was first approached to help WILPF as a volunteer. I'm going to be turning 43. kind of wild to think about that. I've grown a lot, and during the pandemic and helping my folks through some physically challenging times and appreciating those who've been around longer and longer, all the human suffering, and having compassion and empathy for others. I've definitely grown and continue to with each moment of each day. Aún aprendo también, and I shall be better. I am still learning too, and I shall be better. So, you know, with folks who are difficult or challenging, or there's problems, I think it's important to listen, to allow space for folks to share everything and anything that they need to. And when offering information, what to address the issues or concerns, or to respond to what they said, to make sure that they're in a space at that time to be able to hear it, receive it, or if maybe we have to schedule another time, maybe they need to see it first in writing, maybe it needs to be a presentation, that they look at before we talk, and then they can send in questions and get those answered. But just that space. So first, listening, letting them exhaust everything they have to say, taking that in, reflecting on it, not being reactive, or and no matter what, even whatever someone may think of a person, or even if people, like with the school system, are aligned to supporting, say, the city doing legal fraud and corruption, it's still about, they're still people, and you still have to, you make your case when given the opportunity, and then you just have to make your case as clear and concise as possible, hopeful that no matter what, that you can at least lay bare the facts, and hopefully they'll make a good decision, or at least a least bad decision. And then you just gotta, like the prayer goes, accept the things you cannot change, so you do what you can, and I'm always looking to be better. And the next time we talk, I hope to be better than right now. And I think and just take on that there's some version of me that might be able to touch, move, and inspire them too. And until that can happen, just keep on keeping on and do the best I can.
Thank you.
Okay,
You're welcome.
the next question is, I'll just read it to you and you'll know all of this already, but WILPF is an activist, peace, and justice organization, and our eNews stories frequently relate to these issues. It's important to the editor to recognize if an article is inconsistent with WILPF principles. What is your experience, background in peace and or justice activism and or movements? Well, we know about that, so I don't know how much you need to tell us about that. Darian, do you have any thoughts on that?
Maybe if you would just want to very briefly highlight the key peace and justice movement background, but please briefly.
Sure. Well, I think like you were talking about how to lift up WILPF's message and staying consistent, right? With WILPF's message when authoring and writing about it, being like the editor for WILPF, right? I think so in being that, And having once led our social media to be a thriving hotspot to go to see as a lens of what's happening in the world, that way Facebook evolved in 2018 and 2019 was rocking and rolling. And the posts I make on Facebook and Twitter, and how we impacted even folks. I know this is going to sound wild, but after 2 years of tweeting Taylor Swift on our Twitter storms. I mean, those tweets, I'm authoring those tweets. I'm authoring the social media posts. She said in her documentary, word for word, what we told her. Like she wants to be on the right side of history. We used to tweet at her every Wednesday night, 7 to 9. The very end, we'd tweet at the top accounts, and it was, be on the right side of history. And would send it out. And that was a big thing to get, an impact there, to have her engage and want to be, use her voice for good. As far as me personally, with regard to my involvement in social movements, I gotta say, a WILF member, before I even knew WILF, back in 2004, I saw in a documentary called The Corporation. And during the winter of 2011, 2012, I quoted her to her when I got to meet her in person at Barnstable High School, Mary Zepernick, and she was Wilfer, and she was part of POCLAD, Project on Corporations, Law, and Democracy. And she talked about how there were 307 cases brought forward to the Supreme Court. And how 19 of them were, black. It's a 20-year period. And, and it was, for the quote from the Corporation documentary.
What about having to do with what we're asking you to do now? What kind of background do you have in doing newsletters and editing?
Yes, well, newsletters and editing. Well, I've done the newsletter, and I've done the editing with regards to the last two eNewses. And I'm talking all the social media posts, and that's really speaking the voice of the organization, I guess, is what that was responding to. And then I was kind of that talking about Mary Zepernick, was talking about my origins of, getting into the, work on, corporations are not people, money is not speech, campaign finance, which added to my lifetime of climate, activism, organizing, and that led through Occupy, Black Lives Matter movement, racial, social justice work that I do, standing for all people, all children. You asked about my background. I have, whether it's Occupy, work in greater social movements, Occupy, and all the different groups. And then you asked about editing and so forth. I mean, as far as managing a newsletter, this will be the first time I do that on a regular basis as a newsletter, although I have authored plenty, or co-authored plenty of, or edited stories in our eNews going back many years, and published lots. And then you have the last 2 months, and actually, if you want to pull up, you have the November example, and I think the intro to the November eNews is a good example of some of what you'll have with me in this role, is a voice, kind of creating that type of messaging at times like now, when post-Trump election win. What do you say for the introduction of this month's eNews? And I think if we want to put up on the screen right now, I can pull it up. I have it ready to go. If you give me permission to screen share, I can show that for the audience,
Well,
and you all.
Actually, I think we'll ask people to pull that up separately, because I do think we have a number of additional questions yet.
Sure.
Ellen, does that sound reasonable to you? We can include the link to that eNews when we send the recording out to folks.
Do you want to pull it up? Well, that's fine and reasonable, but would you want to just pull it up and leave it on the screen?
You
I,
can't.
Huh?
Go ahead and if you need to do that, then go ahead and do that, and then,
I don't need to, but
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
yeah. Just leave it if you want to just leave that on the screen so people can see it.
well, I think it will be, okay, there it is.
Okay, all right, so that's, okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's my turn now, right? Or, no, it's your turn.
Oh, it is, okay. So is there anything you feel is important to an editor that we didn't ask you?
I'm sorry, say it again.
Is there anything you feel is important to the role of an editor or how you edit that we didn't ask you?
Hold on one second.
That you want to add about editing?
No, and is it new? Let me see. Hold on one second. I think that let me see. I appreciate the question. Well, I guess it would be interesting to see if you have had an opportunity to look at already. If you haven't, it's all good. What do you see that I mean, I'll always open to looking to serve more effectively in a way that people like more, you know, that they feel more aligned with and is more effective and such. And if there's any feedback or, you know, constructive criticism or anything in general that people want to provide me, always learning, always growing, and always open to, you know, that, you know, now and going forward. So I love to listen ad infinitum to what folks imagine is the best thing for the, whether it's in this context, our monthly newsletter, or anything else organizationally in general. Because we're all on the same team, I imagine, even though sometimes that team has such communication challenges when working together. But that's kind of a bigger picture thing. I mean, humans, it's tough, right? Communication's tough. So we do the best we can. We try to give each other the space to think everyone's doing the best they can too, and that we're all coming from a good-hearted place, and we just try to, you know, pull in the same direction and keep pulling in the same direction for good, knowing that democracy is tough, communication's tough, organizing activism is tough, and we just keep on keeping on.
And just incidentally, could you stop screen sharing? Because I think people might want to be able to see you better. Thank you. But thank you for showing that. Okay, Ellen. You're muted this time, Ellen.
Sorry, we hope to have a long-term editor. Is that likely to mesh with your situation?
Yep, I'm not going anywhere. I've been doing this work for over 2 decades, and I'm going to be continued. This is part of my life.
And I'm going to skip the next question because the question is, when could you start? But obviously you've been doing this already.
For the last 2 months, happy to keep on keeping on. And again, I do think that there's a symbiotic relationship to this work and all the other things that I do in WILPF, largely that are unknown, or the roles and responsibilities, not just that I have formally, but things that I do that are value added that don't show up in timesheets nor job descriptions.
So if you get somebody, I won't name any names, but we all know who I'm talking about. If we get somebody that is aggressively upset about something, what, for example, if an article didn't get published because there were too many articles, or if the introduction to it wasn't the way that this person wanted it to be, how would you handle that? If it, it's after the fact and you're having to deal with that.
Got it. So, well, so two things. First, I think that, you need to be as proactive before it happens as possible, to know and have the foresight that these things can and do happen, and to preempt them. So that's one thing. Not to get into a specific, but I think one of my big triumphs that will not show up in a timesheet, it was averting an organizational PR nightmare in August and September, but that's not with digression. But nevertheless, not that, but anyway, that we've heard a theme of that throughout this call, actually, with the George Floyd and the Middle East thing. But to go specifically to the other point, so be proactive as possible. But now you said, okay, you tried to be proactive. Now you're in the face of someone screaming and yelling, being upset. Again, I've said it already on the call. You listen, you let them exhaust themselves. Okay, now what are they? Are they crusading to, whatever? All right. Well, something that we actually had the privilege of doing in Wing Farm, led by Robin Lloyd and wonderfulness, creating the space for it, was actualizing a restorative justice circle. And we talked about how if we can't do it here, then where? And the idea of doing it up there was to have it spread throughout all of WILPF. And if we can't do restorative justice collectively here in a peace organization, then how do we ever truly in our hearts imagine we can actualize peace for the world? And so what I have to say to that is that I have an unbounded, tenacious will to overcome any communication challenges that ever are put forward. I will gladly look to find whatever disagreement there is and bridge that. And I'm open to us all engaging in restorative justice as needed to help heal this organization, to powerfully move forward together, bridging these relationship divides that, so much of the challenges we face, they lie in communication, they lie in language. Sometimes people are disagreeing not because they disagree on the concept, but how they put the concept into language. Or they might even be disagreeing because they didn't feel they were involved enough in the process. And you need to, let them be heard about that. But ultimately, like you're saying, we have a situation like this right now in WILPF, right? Where there's a situation where a lot of work has been done for something that's been going on for a long time. And you have this impasse, right, of people who maybe weren't as involved, but they could have been. We have a committee for that. And there's now, how do we bridge that? And that's what, so I know I'll use what I'm doing right now. You work diligently to be able to articulate that verbally in writing and presentation, giving the best you can, and just have in your heart hopeful optimism that common sense and goodness will prevail, and that people's negative feelings about whatever, that they weren't involved, or they think this should be this or that or whatever, or they have a different idea or approach, Well, I mean, I'd like to imagine if we got more WILF involvement, more people weighing in with these circles, because circles aren't just one or two people. It's not a mediation, you know. We're not saying one-on-one mediation with a mediator. Have community circles. I'd love that, you know. And and you know, I'm not opposed to mediation either. I mean, maybe that would be a wonderful thing if we had WILF trained mediators to help support, not just with me, I'm talking everybody, you know, intra group conflict resolution, you know, like peace, love, and happiness from here to the world, right? You know, so if not here, then where? From restorative
So
justice.
do you have any other questions for us?
Well, um,
You don't have to.
no, I think there's a birth. Sorry, yeah, no, I know. Um, I think what I was, um, no,
You
I,
already know a lot about us, so there's no reason for you to have to come up with a question.
no, but just if you want to know what's really in my mind, it was this idea of, I think that, so I'm thinking about the peace and freedom, and I'm thinking about, um, the eNews is being, I was just imagining in my mind when you asked that the question of like, might there be any appetite within the organization to imagine? I know it, like anything that costs money is like, you know, but like, and I know that things digital, I mean, it's great, especially with a new website. But if the funds existed, for even something that was of a lower print grade than obviously peace and freedom, if organizationally there'd be any interest in having the eNews potentially be a small monthly thing that's physical as well. If that's something that, I'm sure it used to happen at some point, or at least something like it, maybe. I don't know. Because before the internet, I'm imagining there was a way WILF in the 80s or something communicated with their members, 90s, before everything went digital. But but yeah, I don't, you know, would that potentially help with our present?
Visibility.
Well, yeah, well, you know, I think right now the idea of merging, the new website and a social media presence and sharing all these eNews stories online to a younger generation, the intergenerational synergy of how our members that aren't as tech savvy might enjoy seeing some of those e-newses in print, because having it mailed to them, I bet, might engage more eyeballs in going on the and seeing them online, and maybe even encourage some folks to share those news, e-newses online. Maybe it'd be a fun little line item just for 2025 and see how it goes for the e-news, to try to, with the new site and such, engage members and sharing e-news stories on social media with this wonderful new site, and having the thumbnails, those are the photo images in the e-newses, populate on social media. If they receive a, you know, an envelope each month from us, I know that it's not cheap, but
Maybe just a single mailing saying this is what we're producing online. People aren't reading it. Don't you want to? Or so, you know, I mean, put it in different words, but just
I'm just, yeah.
letting people be aware. You know, we have this e-news that comes out every month, and we wanted to give you an example of it here. We can't afford to print it every month, but we wanted to let you know what we're doing and see whether you not only would like to check it, but also if you would like to submit to it. And send it
Actually,
to the membership.
it occurs to me that we might be able to have one page in the Peace and Freedom that talked about the eNews and picked out just the intro pieces and had the archives link or something, but picked out several stories and made people more aware of the eNews that way. It's an interesting idea.
Yeah. We could afford to do that.
And you could have you could have the QR code as well to like the stories and the monthly editions and so forth. I mean, you could even do like a little 4-up, like, I don't know how the cheapest way to, even if it was a little flyer that was like a small little flyer that was a piece of paper with a QR code and just said, monthly eNews, like just a little flyer reminder that they could, if they point their phone at it, it points. I know that it's just a way to kind of remind people, because how easy is it for the email for the eNews to get skipped. And thinking about how we used to have organizational programming monthly, that was the one WILF calls. I thinking back now retroactively with all that I know of the organization, because when I first started volunteering with the organization, being approached for the work I did with Interoccupy to help with the one WILF calls, and not knowing about things like the eNews and such, it's fascinating to me how throughout the duration of those calls, we never once profiled or highlighted the monthly eNews or stories on the monthly eNews. And so that might be a great thing to do if relaunching something that was monthly programming like that, and having the authors be able to be like little panelists. So that way membership who read the eNewses can ask the authors follow up, and there can be vibrant discussions with the stories being read and there being community discussion about them. Because how
talk to Diane Blay about that, because she's trying to get this monthly thing going, and
yeah,
we didn't have it this month because I think the person fell through that was supposed to be there, but or some reason, I don't know, but yeah, it's a good idea to advertise the eNews.
So here's absolutely, and having that programming with, I'll do that, but having that programming where folks are able to talk about it. And even like, for example, we used to do this with the program committee calls with Maestro before we all transitioned to Zoom. The idea of having folks come on, and if members want to go into breakout rooms even to talk about particular eNews with the authors, while also having collective time to talk about particular individual highlighted content. Because I think that imagining someday we're going to have like, say, even if there's 10 stories, right, well, it may not have time to go in an in-depth conversation on a 90-minute call about 10 stories, but we do have time for people to go into breakouts and for the announcement section to be read. I mean, it sounds like a great thing to do would be have monthly programming around start to mesh our work. So have that monthly program, because we have, I'm going to give a shout out to some, we have an author, for example, right? Like we have people, and I'm going to give her, her flowers, because Nancy Price is an incredible writer. There are a lot of them. I'm not trying to whatever, but like, her work for like TPP free zones, for example, when we were crusading that, it was excellent writing about the corporate takeover and such. She did that mostly for Alliance for Democracy, not for WILF. But anyway, and the thing is that how often is it that we have authors who do all this work, time, effort, and energy, like her work in the Peace and Freedom on Ghana, right? And, when there was and the Pan-African, movement and so forth, and tying it into the history of Ghana. And she does all this homework and research, and she writes this. And as an organization, we don't even take the time to highlight our authors and use the different platforms we have, because everybody's thing and people come together, and who wants to say what, and I get it that there's space for that too. That is a great thing to do at the end of calls, like we would do on the One WILPF call, and give those free form time. That's important. And also, Ellen, you remember this, the Twitter storm time was also a really supportive, emotionally bonding time for people to talk about things, because it was like stuffing envelopes, and you could go click, 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 click. And I'm
We
doing
got to
that.
know each other. That's how Cheryl and I connected, was through that. Yeah. And I'm
It's
very grateful
We didn't
because
hear
I
that,
don't have to do
Ellen.
that job anymore.
That's how Cheryl and you,
Pardon?
uh-oh, Ellen is frozen. Everyone is frozen.
You're not.
Ellen, she's asked you about Cheryl and you connecting on those. She
I
asked you to
think,
talk.
I think she's disconnected, getting disconnected.
Darren, you there?
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna stop the.
No, don't stop the recording. She asked you for something. Don't stop that yet, because she asked you for
Okay.
something. Darian.
Right. It was my Zoom link failing. I didn't hear what Ellen said, but I think
Yeah,
Ellen
she couldn't. Could you ask Ellen what you just asked her, please?
Well, I just said, what was that what was it that you were saying about you and Cheryl, Ellen?
It was through the Twitter storms that we did that I met Cheryl. And she joined the disarm committee, and then I ended up asking her to be a co-chair.
So there are opportunities for other kinds of
interaction with other WILPF members.
Yeah, like when you hold space,
right,
when there's
and
informal times, right? That's where you can really build relationship. Because on calls where it's like for example, right now, I'll give, and this is important to kind of talk about because it ties into the eNews, right? And what we can do, but like, for example, like disarm calls have like the 11 and 12 campaigns that are all reporting and talking, and it's so much information in a short period of time that everybody, I know that the expectation is each committee is supposed to be going and having their own call to be doing the work. But we put, the idea of what we're saying right now is the need. It was nice when we connected with the One WILPF, and doing something like that. I know Diane Blaze, God bless her, she's working a spearhead there, and I will reach out to her. And the idea of highlighting some of our content, potentially having breakout rooms where we can put, where people can talk with the authors sometimes, the announcements are made. That's a nice thing. And that's a way to amplify our eNews. Is not just an email that goes out, but really celebrating. You want more authors, right? We talked about that already in the call. Well, let our authors have an opportunity to talk about their pieces. Let's if we have some person who writes a book and we have them come on, well, now everybody wants to go listen to that person. But think about our own wonderful authors. What do we do to support our own? And I think these are ways that we can amplify and elevate our own voices by really taking a tick to pause and think about, hey, we have all these authors for eNews and Peace and Freedom. We can have monthly programming with that to connect and talk. That can connect to branch work and issue committee work. And it can be a feeding network that feeds on itself because it will foster more involvement. And then make sure you build time at the end of these, and sometimes even at the beginning, because it takes 10, 15 minutes, sometimes 20 to get the call fully populated, when you have a monthly reoccurring series, then it takes about 20 minutes before you have everybody get there. So you don't want the beginning of the call to be too formal. Let's get right after it. You want to have that ease time, right? And that,
Unfortunately, I think that really gives encouragement to people to be late. And I know
I know what you're saying, but
some people disregard WILPF and WILPF events or other groups' events if they come in and they're shilly-shallying around. And depending on the person, they don't have time for that. And a start time is supposed to have some meaning. I mean, if it says 15 minutes for getting settled in.
that's the
and
idea. That's the idea. You build in that
But-
time at the very
But you
beginning.
have to say that in
Intros.
your publicity so that people don't feel cheated.
That's what I'm saying. When you do the call design that we do, like at InterOccupy, and we've done for like all the different groups, we used to do that too, built into the One WILPF calls, is that the very beginning of the calls would be, not the meat and potatoes time. We actually
Well,
at the very
maybe
beginning.
it could be something formal though, such as reviewing the eNews.
Sure, we could be. I
At
will.
the beginning of the call saying, have you seen the eNews this month?
that's-
Here's what the stories are, and
But that's not the unstructured social time.
No, what we used to do, we had a structured, unstructured time, right? The structure was the call design. When people would come on, I would put them into breakouts, geographically diverse breakouts. And
This in
those
Occupy.
people, no, this was in WILPF.
Oh, really? I never.
Yeah. We used to go on the One WILPF call to geographically diverse breakouts where WILFers would get a chance to meet and greet one another at the beginning of One WILPF calls. And by the time we came back together, then we would welcome everybody. It was also an opportunity to have everyone check in with one another, talk about what they're up to, and it was nice because then when we got into the call proper and we had speakers and people talking, you'd have WILF members referencing other WILF members' work who they just met in the intro of the call, discussing their work, which even fostered greater conversations, because then that person who referenced, well, the person they reference now shares, and now we're having a conversation that wouldn't even have taken place. Because the whole part of that call design, and this is part of what yours truly does with InterOccupy, and we all do, is call design. This is why it wasn't just Maestro to Zoom. We had a whole approach to calls that when people are hosting calls themselves, they're not appreciating the fact that we had an entire structure start to end that was planned every single call. And so the idea is that you want people who get on a call to be able to verbally share and engage as fast as possible. You don't want to jump into work, right? And that's a way to get people to, feel more of a part of it.
so
Unless it's a presentation.
do we have anything else to discuss here about eNews? If not, I'm going to turn off the recording.
Well, I would just say right there that this would be tying that into like an eNews specific monthly call, for example, to promote our work. That would be like a forum where people could just have a open discussion about that month's eNews and what they think of the articles, right? It could be like a conversation about the news of the being reported in WILF and how things went, or when there's like an action, like Disarm had those standout actions and such that were published in the eNews, right? It's like people talking about how are those actions, we're reporting back about those. I think that's great for us to actually talk.
Rather than it be the Jane Addams call, have an eNews call.
I think that would be great, an eNews call. Like an eNews, because I think there's so much to do, and I know people are opposed to thinking about like another call, another this. But I think now more than ever, with everything we're facing, we need each other, and we need positive spaces, and we need informal positive spaces. And just talking about our work, I think a more informal eNews specific call to talk to the authors, get to know the authors, ask them questions, let the authors speak, and maybe even have key members of WILPF who doing that work at a branch level, or if a branch is presenting as the author at an issue committee level, kind of come together and support one another synergistically.
So
think
I
that'd be
think
really
I
helpful.
think this is a good idea. What do you think, Darian?
Well, frankly, I was thinking that we have no e-news in January, and it's certainly a significant month. At the least, it would be good to have call a webinar, so-called an e-news webinar in January that would talk about the November pick out.
Right.
Darren, you just cut out for me.
Allow people to pick out.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Darren.
Okay, allow people to
15
pick out articles. Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can hear you sometimes. It's breaking
yeah,
up.
it's
Okay,
breaking up.
I need to get off this call.
Okay.
My connection is getting bad and I